Imagine a frozen town where the river itself holds a secret, and one young officer vanishes beneath the winter silence. Imagine a man who chose 5 years of solitude and a German shepherd whose instincts never failed him. This story is about second chances, about courage that whispers instead of shouts, and about how hope sometimes arrives in the shape of 4 paws on snow. Before we begin, let me ask you, where are you watching from today? Tell us in the comments. And if this story touches your heart, please press subscribe to support the channel so we can continue bringing you stories of faith, loyalty, and redemption. Snowbridge in mid-January could have been mistaken for a town preserved inside a snow globe that someone never stopped shaking. The wind over Silvervein River roared like a hungry animal, pushing dry needles of snow across the ice, sharpening every surface into glassy edges that glittered beneath a muted winter sun. Houses huddled low under heavy roofs of white, chimneys releasing fragile gray ribbons into a sky so pale it seemed drained of memory. The townspeople walked with heads bowed and collars up, as though the very air might bite exposed skin. The streets were quiet, the world muffled beneath drifts of snow, half as tall as the mailboxes that speared up from them. In that hush, even car engines sounded like guilty intruders. Out on the river itself, where the ice lay half a meter thick and groaning, we are introduced to a body wrapped in silver emergency insulation blankets. Here lies Amber Wyatt, age 29, a young investigative police officer of medium height at around 5'6", with chestnut hair that now spills damp and frozen from beneath the edge of the reflective wrap, strands fused together like filaments of ice. Her face is soft-lined but resolute, the face of someone who has argued with superiors, fought bureaucracies, and believed, perhaps naively, that one relentless woman can still stand up against corruption. She has sharp analytical instincts and a stubborn streak that often pushed her into danger. More than once, fellow officers warned her that her tenacity would one day outpace her caution. The stress of her work etched faint lines near her eyes, but there is youth yet in her mouth, kindness that has not been fully weathered away. At the time of this moment, however, she is not a fighter, nor an investigator. She is a slowly cooling organism wrapped in layers of emergency foil, swimming on a literal raft of ice with only an occasional twitch of breath to show her life has not fully retreated. Amber's vulnerability is contrasted by the environment itself. The Silvervein River is an expanse of frozen marble, fractured here and there by old fissures where ice plates have shifted. In Snowbridge, stories are often told of people falling through at night and being swallowed up by the black water beneath. The river is part of the town's folklore, a place of play for children in early winter, then a place of caution once midwinter arrives. Today it is a quiet accomplice to attempted murder. Along the bank, some distance away, stands a figure, Elias Grant, age 42, though the physical presence he gives off belongs to someone older, perhaps even carved from the same wood as the trees behind him. He is tall at 6'3", with broad shoulders and the athletic build of a once active military man who carries the memory of training in every muscle. His beard is thick and slightly unmanaged, peppered with early silver streaks matching the frost that collects in it. His hair is dark and shaggy, as though scissors have not been applied to it in months. His eyes are steel blue, observant yet withdrawn, the eyes of someone who has seen enough suffering to last several lifetimes. Elias carries himself with silence rather than weight. He rarely speaks unless necessary, and when he looks at you, it is with the quiet assessment of a man who knows both how to save a life and how easily one can be lost. Once, Elias was a Navy rescue specialist who dove into turbulent night seas to drag drowning men back to survival. But the day he failed to rescue the person closest to him, his younger brother, caught in a riptide during a storm training exercise, something in Elias collapsed inward like a burnt-out star. Rather than reaching outward to the world, he retreated into self-imposed exile. He bought a cabin on the outskirts of Snowbridge and lived there alone, maintaining simple routines, chopping wood, gathering water, walking his land with the quiet dignity of someone paying penance. By his side now is Rex, age 7, a German shepherd of proud stature and careful demeanor. Rex is tall for his breed and weighs nearly 90 pounds, with a sable black coat that looks almost sculpted, each strand of fur swept by the wind like the bristles of a grand paintbrush. His ears stand high, alert and finely tuned. His amber-brown eyes move constantly, absorbing patterns of motion and scent. Rex has an intelligent stillness, the kind of posture that radiates discipline. He was trained once as a K-9 service companion, specializing in search and rescue response, but he was retired early after losing part of mobility in one hind leg due to an injury sustained during a collapsed building recovery operation in Michigan. The leg healed, though imperfectly, and the dog now walks with the slightest shift in gait, not a limp so much as a noble imperfection. Rex has a temperament that blends loyalty with calmness. He is neither aggressive nor submissive, and he treats every stranger like someone whose intentions must first be measured rather than assumed. With Elias, Rex shares a quiet emotional resonance. Both have experienced loss. Both respond not with frantic noise, but with purposeful quiet. When Rex begins to sniff the air, testing it like a musician listening for the first tune in a melody, Elias initially pays no mind. Wolves sometimes cross the frozen river. Foxes sometimes nest in the cattail patches nearby. Sounds and scents are common disruptions. But Rex's body stiffens, his ears pivot, his nose lifts higher. In that moment, he is transformed from a domestic animal into the pure expression of a centuries-old working instinct. He emits a low sound, not a bark, not a whine, but a humming groan that vibrates like a cello string struck by emotion. Elias feels the rumble of it in his hip, where Rex's body presses absently against him. "What is it?" Elias murmurs, though talking to dogs is not a habit of his. Still, Rex answers, not with speech, but with motion, because now the dog has begun to walk, slow but intent, toward the slope that leads to the river. Elias follows, long strides crunching across snow. At the river's edge, the wind quiets, as though winter itself waits. Rex begins to paw lightly at the ice, turning his head to look up at Elias, with an urgency that is eerily human. And then Elias sees it, or thinks he does, a faint shimmer of metallic foil caught between the drifts. For a moment, he suspects it might be a discarded emergency sheet or camping tarp blown from someone's gear. But Rex moves onto the ice, placing each paw with deliberate pressure. Elias curses under breath. It's dangerous. But the dog knows ice integrity better than most people. Feet following paw prints, Elias walks out onto the river. A few meters out, he kneels, brushing aside snow. What he reveals makes his breath snag sharply. The foil is not covering debris, it is covering a person. Elias presses fingers to the reflective wrap. He feels the slightest indentation of ribs beneath. He begins peeling away edges of the silver blanket, and what emerges is a face, pale, lips blue, lashes frozen with feathery white. Amber's chest rises so subtly it could be mistaken for the wind, but Elias feels it. She is alive. Rex stands beside them, lowering his head, and in his eyes there is a ferocity of intention. He has found someone to save, and in that frozen moment, under the sharp winter sky, the silence of Elias Grant's life begins to crack. The cabin of Elias Grant stood like a lone sentinel against the mountain wind, built of heavy pine logs, edges darkened by years of weather, windows small and deep set. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, coiling upward into a night sky lit only by the faint shimmer of snow crystals. It was the kind of place one might imagine for a monk or a hermit, or a man curled inward against a past that refused to fade. Within, the fire had been coaxed to life in the stone hearth, beating warmth across the room. Amber Wyatt lay on a cot near the fire, wrapped in layers of wool blankets and thick towels. Her eyelashes were thawing, frozen edges melting to droplets. The color that had left her lips was beginning to seep faintly back. Elias crouched beside her, his large hands working with steady gentleness. Though his build was rugged, his touch bore the careful restraint of someone trained to avoid inflicting harm on weakened bodies. He checked her pulse, slow but firm. Then, systematically, he administered warm water in small sips, born of long-ingrained procedures. Rex rested near the cot, lying sphinx-like, nose occasionally twitching as if measuring changes in her breathing. The German Shepherd had that unnerving ability to remain statue still for long stretches, yet remain fully aware of every shift in the space. Amber stirred. Her voice emerged like a worn thread, scraping across stone. Where am I? Elias met her gaze, two sets of eyes assessing one another. Hers, searching, frightened. His, steady, cautious. You're safe, he answered simply, and his tone had no flourish, only truth. Amber took a moment to orient herself. Her fingers moved beneath the blankets, feeling texture, feeling sensation. She blinked, struggling to place memory. She looked at Elias with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. Now we pause to describe her again, but with the added dimension of animation, her face alive. Her features retain an earnest sharpness, a woman with emotional armor but not emotional numbness. Even half frozen, she reads as observant. Meanwhile, Elias, in the warm firelight, reveals more of his presence, his posture slightly slouched, his shoulders bearing invisible burdens, his face framed by that rough beard and winter-thick hair. He is handsome in a way that is unpolished, a statue weathered by wind rather than sculpted by vanity. When he moves, it is always with intention, never wasted effort. "Can you remember what happened?" he asked. Amber swallowed, throat sore. "I was grabbed, drugged, I think. Everything blurred. Then, cold, too cold." Her breathing hitched, memory pressed sharp. "I thought I was dying." Elias nodded, without platitude or pity. Most would have. At this moment, there came a knock, not on the door, but on Amber's awareness. She noticed Rex. He sat up, and his amber eyes fixed on her with a look of solemn recognition. This was not curiosity. This was acceptance. Her lips quivered. "You saved me," she whispered to him. The dog lifted his head slightly as though acknowledging the truth of it. Elias moved away briefly, returning with a worn enamel mug of steaming broth. He held it out to Amber. "Drink." Slowly. She obeyed, one sip at a time. The warmth traveled through her body like a gathering spark. For the first time since waking, she took in the cabin. Walls lined with hand tools, winter coats, ropes, boots, an old frame photograph of a young man and another older teen on a fishing pier, both laughing, both holding a huge silver fish between them. That picture, she didn't know, was Elias and his brother Matthew, before the tide took one and changed the other. "Did you call for help?" Amber asked. "No," Elias said. "Not yet." "I'm a police officer," she managed. "They'll be looking for me." His expression shifted, fractionally. Not disbelief, not dismissal. Simply thought. Here we introduce Amber's temperament further. She is someone who believes in accountability. The nightmare she just endured does not erase the habits of integrity. "I have to report," she said. "I was attacked. I found something I wasn't supposed to. About Sterling Coal, the Frostline mining operations." At that name, something else flickered in Elias. Not recognition of the scandal, but recognition of the kind of truth that gets people hurt. He sat back slowly in a wooden chair and told nothing of himself. Amber sensed it. She studied him, like one trained to read body language. "You live alone," she observed softly. 5 years of silence hovered behind that statement. Elias did not answer. Amber continued, voice warming. "You don't talk much?" "Not worth saying much," he replied. "But you heard Rex," she said. "You trusted him. You followed him. That speaks louder than words." Elias almost cracked a smile. Almost, but sorrow sealed it back. Rex shifted closer to Amber's bedside, his warm breath comforting. She reached out, gently grazing his head with her fingers. The fur was soft, warmer than expected. "You're lucky you're found by a rescuer," Amber mused. "I'm not a rescuer anymore," Elias said quietly. Amber turned her head to look at him fully. "You saved someone tonight," she whispered. "That's exactly what a rescuer does." Silence fell, but this time not cold like outside. This was the silence of a crack forming in stone, of something long sealed beginning to unseal. Amber then spoke more clearly. "Sterling Coal is poisoning the river. Frostline Mining is dumping unchecked chemical waste. They've bribed several officers. I have files, had files. I was on the verge of exposing everything. Then, someone silenced me." Elias's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in focus. "Names?" he asked. "More than one," she answered. "And some at the station. I don't know who to trust. But there's Chief Henry Ward. He's honest. And my contact inside the FBI. They'll put the pieces together." The cabin seemed to inhale that information. Something stirred in Elias. The rescuer instinct he had smothered for years reasserted itself. Not with drama, but with quiet momentum. Slowly, Amber's breathing relaxed. Strength returned. Exhaustion assumed command. Her eyes fluttered. Elias leaned closer, listening to rhythmic breath. She needed rest. He stood, took one wool blanket, shook it, and gently draped it over her. Rex rotated once in a circle and lay down beside the cot like a living barrier. Amber, half asleep now, whispered, "Thank you. To both of you." Elias didn't answer aloud, but Rex did something more eloquent. He placed one paw very gently against Amber's forearm, as though anchoring her to life. Outside the cabin, wind wailed around cedar trunks. Snow shifted and whispered across the frozen ground. Deep in those woods, no one would imagine that inside a small pine cabin, the fate of a corrupt empire had just collided with the conscience of a broken man. Amber drifted fully into sleep. Her head rested against the edge of the pillow, hair finally thawed. Breathing deepened. Elias looked at her, then at Rex. Rex looked back. Two beings who had pulled a man out of silence. And before the fire settled to embers, Elias finally spoke, not to Amber, but to the dog. "We'll help her," he said softly. "I know it." And for the first time in 5 years, Elias Grant believed those words. Dawn came late to Snowbridge. The sun was reluctant in January, slouching upward as though burdened by winter's weight. Pale light seeped through the trees, casting long bones of shadow across the ice and snow. The frozen river, brushed by gentle morning frost, had already faded from being a battleground with death into something deceptively serene. For Elias Grant, the memory of last night's rescue was not a blur. It was sharp, like the jagged crack lines in the ice he had traversed. He stood again on the frozen bank at sunrise, studying the spot where Rex had detected Amber. The wind traced cold fingers across his cheeks. He saw not the danger he had faced, but the miracle of 2 heartbeats where he once expected none. Rex, beside him, sniffed the air as if recording the scent of memory. He had a focused energy today, body upright, ears high, not tense, but prepared. The German shepherd seemed aware that the instinct he exercised last night had made the difference between a life fading away and a life persisted. Elias took a long breath, turned away from the river, and started back up the ridge toward the cabin. His boot prints from last night had partially filled with snow, making the trail softer. The morning silence was total, except for the creaking of pine limbs shedding frost. Inside the cabin, warmth reigned, thick, persistent, healing warmth. The fire crackled with comforting music. Amber Wyatt was awake now, sitting fully upright on the cot. Her chestnut hair was still damp from thawing, and her cheeks carried a hint of the pink instead of deathly white. In the glow of daylight, she looked alive, though not yet strong. Elias stepped inside. Amber turned toward him, expression composed. She was the kind of person who, even when weakened, carried herself like she was gathering evidence. "You went back to the river," she said. "Why?" He shrugged slightly. "Wanted to reconsider ice depth, and to think." Amber watched him closely. "You came back." He nodded once. "Yes. And thank you again," her voice softened, "for not giving up when you found me." Elias didn't respond in words. He simply lit the second oil lamp, brightening the room, and began preparing morning provisions, heating oats, boiling water, slicing a piece of dried venison. Rex lay nearby, eyes half closed, yet entirely observant. Amber's thoughts drifted into new territory. She studied Elias carefully, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. This was a man who had once charged into black seawater in the dead of night to retrieve drowning soldiers. He had spent years mastering courage and skill, only to then spend years trying to forget that he once possessed either. "Did you ever think," she began, "that you'd have to do that kind of rescue again?" Elias stopped stirring the oats. He didn't turn around. "No." Amber pressed gently. "Did you want to?" Elias resumed stirring. No? She absorbed that. The silence afterward was short but heavy. Then the emotional tide shifted. Amber stood shakily and walked toward the window, steadying herself with one hand on the table. From the side, her frame looked slender, almost fragile beneath the layers of clothing, but her stance had purpose. She gazed at the woods outside, dark green pines tangled against white drifts. "These trees," she murmured, "they've seen things, haven't they?" Elias followed her line of sight. "They've heard more than they've seen." Amber turned and met his eyes. "And you've been among them for 5 years." He didn't confirm or deny, only remained still. Then came another voice, the voice of a soul connected to both of them. Rex rose and padded over to Amber again. This time, Amber knelt, running a full hand through his thick fur. She gave a half laugh, half sob. "You're calibrated, aren't you? You just know." Rex responded by leaning into her hand. Not roughly, not dramatically, just a quiet acceptance. Amber's gaze then shifted to Elias. "You've worked with him for a while." Elias gave a small nod. "I got him after his injury. He could have been put down if they believed he couldn't perform anymore." Amber looked stunned. "Put down? For one leg?" Elias gestured subtly at Rex's back left leg. "He compensates well, but the injury meant he couldn't meet the official performance metrics. So, they retired him." Amber frowned deeply, voice thick with empathy. "They retired him, but they didn't retire his instinct." Elias looked at Rex with something like affection. "No, they didn't." Amber's eyes warmed. People underestimate those who've been hurt, because they don't see how much the past carved into them. Elias gave her a rare, direct look. "Yes, they do." The air inside the cabin grew still again, this time with recognition between souls who had both survived losses. Amber took a deeper breath, strengthening her posture. "Last night," she said, "I wasn't just dying. I was being erased. That was the goal." Her voice bore the gravity of revelation. "I found documents," she continued. "Emails, leaked memos, physical samples. They were planning new dumping channels into the riverbed. I was the one connecting the dots. And they knew." Elias listened, not just hearing, but processing. "You're certain it was Sterling Cole's chain?" Amber nodded. "Yes, but not just him. I think he has accomplices inside our structure. Someone fed him information about my investigation." Elias leaned back. "Meaning you were betrayed?" Amber swallowed. "Yes." There it was, a truth weighty and ugly. Elias set the bowl of oats before her. "Eat." She did, spoon by spoon, life returning. Minutes passed with simple sounds, clink of spoon, crackle of fire, shift of wood. Then Amber asked, "Do you still have people you talk to? Friends? Family?" Elias answered with no hesitation. "No. But you have Rex." His reply was instant, unapologetic. "Yes." Amber gave a gentle smile. "And Rex has you." At this, Rex lifted his head proudly, as if understanding the compliment. When Amber finished eating, she settled back onto the cot. Her strength was returning, but her voice softened again. "I need time," she said. "But once I'm strong enough, I have to contact Chief Ward and the FBI contact. I need them to know I'm alive." Elias nodded. "You'll have that time." The cabin was now fully in daylight, fire orange mixed with winter silver through the window. Amber sighed, this one of exhaustion rather than despair, and lay sideways, eyes closing. Her voice, fading into sleep, said, "I thought no one would ever find me." And Elias, in a tone hardly above breath, replied, "You were found." Rex lay beside her again, one large paw resting lightly against her arm, just as he had done at midnight. Outside, the snow paused falling. It was as though winter itself was listening. Elias stood watch. For once, he was not alone, and for once, he had someone who needed him again. Snowbridge wore a gray afternoon like a heavy cloak. The sky was low, clouds sagging under the weight of coming snowfall, and light filtered through them in sheets of muted silver. Tiny flecks of ice drifted in the air, not yet snowflakes, but scouts of the storm to come. The world felt braced for revelation. Amber Wyatt, now stronger and steady on her feet, had abandoned the cot that morning. She paced slowly along the interior wall of the cabin, regaining warmth and mobility. Her neutral-toned coat hung loosely around her, and a scarf was wrapped around her neck. The color was back in her face, though still delicate. Her eyes held that analytical sharpness again, the unmistakable fire of someone returning to her mission. Elias watched from the table, sharpening a hunting knife against a whetstone. It wasn't an act of preparation for violence. It was habit, routine, grounding. The rhythm of blade against stone, like someone resetting their breathing. Rex lay between them, in his accustomed central position, as though instinctually keeping them anchored to one another. Amber took a deep breath, collecting courage, and began. "You should know the full truth," she said. Elias raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. Amber continued, voice measured, professional. "Sterling Cole isn't just wealthy, he's powerful. He owns Frostline Mining, and over the last 3 years, he's expanded operations along the river where the ground is softest." Elias nodded. "Makes digging cheaper. And easier to hide," Amber added. "He started drilling artificial melt shafts into the ice, vertical tunnels that let liquid runoff seep into the riverbed." Elias frowned. "Illegal and lethal." Amber looked toward the window, where the river, ghostly under its frozen cover, lay in the distance. "Sterling bribed people, not just laborers, people in uniform." Rex lifted his head at the cold edge in her tone. Amber turned back to Elias. "I began investigating missing water records from the Environmental Bureau. Chemical readings were inconsistent. Half-month reports didn't match independent samples. That flagged my attention. I didn't accuse anyone at first. I simply followed the inconsistencies." This next part introduced another figure, the first ally. "Chief Henry Ward," she said softly, "was the one person in the department who supported me. Henry is in his late 50s, Caucasian, soft-bellied but sharp-minded. He has a calm presence, rare in police work, and the kind of eyes that look at people instead of through them. He's not easily intimidated, maybe because he's been doing this job longer than most criminals have been alive." Elias listened carefully. "Henry believed me. He helped me open a back-channel inquiry. He told me not to file official complaints yet, not until we had irrefutable proof." Amber swallowed. "That was our mistake. We waited too long." Elias's sharpening slowed to a stop. Amber continued. "I was also in contact with someone in the FBI, codename Harper." She hesitated, then clarified. "Not their real name. I never met them face to face. Only encrypted calls and anonymized message drops. Harper warned me several times that my investigation had been noticed." Elias leaned forward. "And you didn't stop?" Amber met his gaze fiercely. "Would you have?" Elias considered, then gave a single answer. "No." Amber let out a breath that was almost relief. She continued. "We finally got enough laboratory samples to prove chemical dumping, mercury traces, industrial solvents, river contamination. Harper was guiding me toward building a case strong enough for federal intervention. And that," Elias guessed, "was when Sterling realized you might succeed." Amber nodded. "Yes, and someone inside the department tipped him off. That night, I left the station, got into my car, then nothing. I remember a smell, a pinch, a fog. I was conscious enough to know I was being moved. Then I woke up wrapped in foil, on the ice." Elias's jaw tightened, not in rage, but in moral clarity. "They wanted Winter to kill you," he said. "Yes," Amber replied. "That way, no open wounds, no external marks, just a tragic accident. One less loud voice." Rex made a low, throaty noise, not a growl, but something more like sorrowful disapproval. Amber's tone softened. "But Sterling Cole didn't expect you to." Elias set down the knife and rose slowly, running his fingers through his beard in thought. "I didn't expect it either." There was a pause, heavy but not hopeless. Amber looked at Elias with respect. "You said last night you're not a rescuer anymore." He stiffened slightly. "And?" he asked. Amber's next words were gentle, not confrontational. "You walked onto cracking ice in the dead of night to save a stranger. That instinct doesn't disappear. It just gets buried under pain." The cabin grew quiet. Elias finally spoke. "You said there were others involved. others who let this happen. Yes, Amber said. Not everyone is corrupt, but enough are compromised to endanger anyone who speaks out. Elias began pacing slowly, hands behind his back. He was thinking not as a hermit, but as a strategist returning to life. Amber pressed on. We need to inform Chief Ward and Harper, let them know I'm alive, and that the evidence still exists. Elias nodded. And when you're strong enough, we'll go to them. Amber looked surprised. You'll come with me? Elias turned to face her. You think I'm letting you walk into the nest alone? Rex gave a loud exhale through his nose, as if approving the decision. Amber smiled, not triumphantly, but gratefully. Outside, snow began to fall in earnest, silky flakes drifting downward like quiet applause from the sky. Elias crossed the room and reached for his heavy winter coat. He lifted a radio scanner from the shelf, one of his few connections to civilization. Amber watched. What are you doing? Checking police frequencies, Elias said, to see if they're looking for you or if they're pretending not to. Rex stood beside him, alert again. Amber felt a chill, this time not from cold, but from the nearness of danger still surrounding her. Elias switched frequencies slowly. Most channels were silent. One had casual patrol chatter. Another carried weather warnings. Then, there, a clipped voice. Still no sign of Wyatt. Last ping was near Snowbridge outskirts. Keep inquiries discreet. Elias turned the volume down. Amber's stomach tightened. That means Ward really is looking for me. Or someone else is pretending to. Amber swallowed. Rex pressed against her leg. That simple gesture steadied her. She continued explaining. If Sterling's people think I'm dead, they'll relax. They'll slip. Ward and Harper can build the case. Elias looked at her. And you're willing to stay hidden until the time is right? Amber exhaled. If that's what it takes to protect the town, the river, and the truth. A long silence followed, not fearful, but resolute. Elias nodded once. Then that's what we'll do. Amber's shoulders eased. A plan was forming. The fire crackled louder, like punctuation. The snow outside thickened, and in the flickering cabin light, 3 figures, 1 wounded woman, 1 mutely determined man, and 1 vigilant German shepherd, stood together at the threshold of something larger than all of them. The truth of the ice poison was no longer silent, and neither was Elias Grant. Night fell over Snowbridge not like a curtain, but like a slow deepening of color. The sky turned from pale iron to slate, and then to velvet black dusted with crystalline snow. The cold intensified, sharpening on the breath. Street lamps glowed in cones of golden haze, and the distant hum of town life dimmed beneath the hush of winter. Inside the cabin, Elias Grant was fastening the final buckle of his heavy coat. Amber Wyatt stood near him, dressed warmly, face set in determination rather than fear. She was healed enough now to be steady on her feet and ready to act. Rex stood between them, tail low in readiness, eyes bright with intent. You sure about this? Elias asked quietly. Amber nodded. Yes. Tonight's the night we break the silence. Elias allowed himself a short exhale and opened the door. Snow gusted in, catching amber sparks from the hearth. Rex bounded out first into the dark, paws silent against the packed snow. Elias and Amber followed, closing the door behind them. The destination was a high vantage point above the ice section of Silvervein River, a ridge where Elias used to scout wildlife in quieter times. But tonight, it was where watchers would become witnesses. From that hill, they could already see activity below. Floods of light sweeping across the river's surface, figures moving in disciplined patterns. The operation was underway. Down on the ice, men in winter gear were offloading metal containers from a truck, cylindrical and matte gray, marked with industrial safety codes. The figures belonged to Frostline Mining's night crew. They were directed by supervisors calling curt orders, voices echoing against the frozen emptiness. Amber counted the workers. 6 laborers, 2 overseers, no visible weapons. Elias scanned with binoculars. And there, he murmured, our host of honor. Sterling Cole stood near the river hole, the same artificial shaft Amber had described. He He was in his late 40s, tall, athletic build, gone slightly soft from boardroom comforts. Square jaw, expensive insulated coat, fur collar, and gloves, too fancy for manual work. A man more accustomed to signing orders than executing them. Sterling's face was sharply defined, lips tight with tension. Not fear yet, but vigilance. Every few minutes, he checked his watch, eyes darting to the tree line, as though calculating risk. "He's expecting someone," Elias remarked. Amber gave a grim smile. "Yes, but not who's actually coming." On the ridge beside them, quietly emerging from the shadowed pines, came two men. The first was Sheriff Henry Ward, introduced now in full presence. He was indeed in his late 50s, with a wide frame softened by years, but a posture upright and steady. His skin ruddy from cold, gray mustache trimmed neatly. His eyes deep-set and perceptive, the eyes of someone who has seen guilt and tragedy and a hope, and still believes in duty. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle but firm. "Amber," he said warmly, "good to see you breathing." She smiled. "Good to be breathing, Chief." Beside him stood a lean, alert figure, the undercover FBI agent Amber had known only as Harper. Now their personhood took form. Harper was in their mid-40s, mixed race, with a sharp hawk-like gaze and a compact, athletic frame. Their hair was close-cropped, efficient. Their clothing, matte tactical winter gear, blended into the landscape without reflection. Their temperament was razor-calculated, every movement economical. Harper didn't waste words. They gave Amber a nod, then said, "We have a solid visual. Tonight we get the evidence. And the man." Elias studied both quietly. For the first time in years, he was surrounded by people engaged in purpose. Strangely, it didn't repel him. Henry Ward pulled out a radio. "Positions confirmed, units holding perimeter, Team Alpha ready to move." Amber inhaled slowly. "Let's do this." Harper spoke. "Key principle, minimal physical engagement. We trap him with facts, not fists." Elias murmured, "That's how justice should work." Rex stood poised, nose to air, tail still, a sentinel waiting for the signal. Henry Ward raised binoculars, surveying the ice. Then, at his cue, Harper lifted a hand. From beneath ridges, from behind boulders, from behind trucks parked farther back, dark figures emerged. FBI agents, silent, coordinated, forming a tightening ring. Down on the ice, the laborers didn't notice at first. Frostline crew bent over their cargo, busy prying open lids, sealing hoses, feeding hidden channels beneath the ice. Then, "FBI!" came the command. "Hands visible. Nobody moves." Bright tactical beams flared on, forming a constellation of white stars across the ice. Sterling Cole froze. Amber's voice followed, calm, authoritative, carrying across the night like a clear bell. "Sterling Cole, you are under arrest for environmental poisoning of municipal waters and attempted murder of a law enforcement officer." Sterling spun toward the sound. That unmistakable voice he assumed had already died beneath the ice. Sterling saw Amber, alive, his face drained of color. "No," he breathed. "No." For a beat, the world went silent again. Then Sterling bolted. He sprinted across the ice, trench boots scrambling for traction, heading toward the far tree line. Elias didn't move. Harper didn't move. Henry Ward didn't move. There was no need. Rex did. The German Shepherd leapt off the ridge, hitting the slope at speed. Snow sprayed behind him in white plumes. He closed the distance with powerful strides, not snarling, not attacking, simply intercepting. Sterling raced forward, only to be halted by a large, immovable canine presence blocking his line. Rex didn't bark. He didn't even bare teeth. He simply stood. Sterling tried to pivot. Rex moved again, quick and precise, blocking once more. Sterling stumbled, slipped, and fell. Not violently, not dangerously, just gracelessly. His palms slapped cold ice. At that moment, 2 FBI agents arrived, cuffing him cleanly. Sterling looked up, wheezing, eyes wide with disbelief. "You shouldn't be alive," he panted at Amber. She gazed down at him with a calm that was almost merciful. "You shouldn't have assumed winter would finish your work." Rex exhaled through his nose, a sound full of quiet judgment. Harper walked up, their tone measured. "Sterling Cole, you will be tried in federal court, and your accomplices will come to light." Henry Ward approached too, stern but not triumphant. "You poisoned our river, Sterling. You betrayed the town that trusted you." Sterling thrashed weakly but exhausted himself quickly. Amber stepped beside Rex and rested a hand gently on his head, in gratitude. Elias, still up the ridge, shook his head slightly. In wonderment, no bark, no bite, only presence. There was something holy in that. The workers, the laborers, scared and clueless, were not cuffed but interviewed, separated and shielded, treated as potential witnesses rather than perpetrators. The night unfolded with lawful, orderly procedure. No gunfire, no brutality, no chaotic struggle, just truth, finally standing in daylight, even beneath darkness. Rex sat proudly by Amber, chest high, ears forward, as though claiming symbolic guardianship. And up on the ridge, Elias finally allowed himself the quietest smile, not for victory, but for justice. Spring did not arrive in Snowbridge with a flourish. It came slowly, shyly, like a guest uncertain of its welcome. First there were the drops, steady tap-tap-taps from eaves, where snow liquefied into clear rivulets. Then patches of earth appeared in brown footprints along the worn fence lines. Soon the river's surface began to soften, fractured panes of ice drifting apart like puzzle pieces set loose by warmth. 2 months had passed since Sterling Cole's arrest. The investigation expanded, netting additional co-conspirators, employees paid to delete digital records, officers bribed to look away, and a procurement manager who quietly diverted chemical shipments. There were interviews, hearings, indictments, none of which took place in Snowbridge. Justice came from federal chambers and televised press rooms. But healing belonged to Snowbridge itself. On a late March afternoon, the town gathered at the municipal square. Families, elders, workers, school teachers, they filled the courtyard like seeds in fertile soil. The air was cool, but not cruel. Breezes rustled banners that had been put up for the occasion. Community Recognition Day. A small wooden platform stood in the center, a podium waiting, microphones ready. Amber Wyatt stood off to one side, dressed smartly in a charcoal coat and dark slacks. Her hair, freed from frost and fear, hung confidently over her shoulders. She no longer looked like a near victim wrapped in silver foil on a frozen river. She looked whole, strong, herself. Near the platform stood Chief Henry Ward, wearing his formal police uniform, hat tucked beneath his arm. Beside him was Harper, the FBI agent, still understated in manner, but smiling modestly, visibly relieved with the outcome. They had done their duty, and today was the day to acknowledge the courage of those who risked much to tell the truth. Elias Grant stood farther back in the crowd. He tried to remain unseen, though this was increasingly difficult. He wore a clean shirt beneath his rough jacket, hair trimmed somewhat, beard shaped slightly. He looked presentable, though still fully himself. But unlike before, there was no hollow in his eyes. Instead, there was softness and belonging. And beside him, Rex sat tall, like a furry monument, watching everything calmly. Mayor Rosita Hembry, a plump woman with cheeks like rosy apples in early spring, stepped up to the podium. She was in her 60s with hair in a tight silver bun and voice bright as a church bell. She had always been beloved, a motherly figure of the town. Her words carried warmly. Snowbridge has endured much these past months, but we endured it together. Today we stand not just to celebrate justice, but to honor those who embodied courage when silence would have been easier. She gestured toward Amber. Officer Amber Wyatt, you risked your life to expose the poisoning of our river and the betrayal of public trust. Because of your persistence, federal agencies could act, arrests were made, and today our waters run clean again. The crowd applauded, not rowdy applause, but steady, respectful, deeply appreciative. Amber approached the podium. Elias watched. He could see her posture steady itself, the way a tree braces in wind without shaking. Amber spoke clearly. I didn't do any of this alone. The truth was bigger than me, and so were the people who stood beside me. She nodded toward Henry, Ward, and Harper. Then, her eyes found Elias and Rex. Elias stiffened, uncomfortable with attention, but Rex merely blinked with noble calm. Amber continued, "I owe my life, literally, to a man who chose silence for 5 years and then broke it when someone needed his voice and his hands." Elias Grant reminded us that heroism isn't always loud or public. Sometimes it is quiet and deeply human. Elias lowered his gaze. Compliments had always been hard for him. He didn't see himself as hero, just as someone who answered a call. Amber then extended a hand toward Rex. And this dog, Rex, guided the way when all seemed lost. He didn't bark, didn't fight. He just stood firm, like a sentinel of instinct and loyalty. The crowd murmured in admiration. Several elderly women smiled warmly, some wiping eyes. A little boy near the front tugged his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mama, can we get a dog like him?" After Amber finished, Mayor Hembry returned to the podium, holding a small medal attached to a leather strap. It bore engraved letters. She called out, "Rex, please come forward." Elias blinked. Rex looked up at him as if asking permission. Elias gave a small nod. So Rex trotted through the crowd, welcomed by pats and murmured affection. When he reached the platform, he sat politely, like he knew ceremony. Mayor Hembry placed the strap gently around Rex's neck. "Rex, watcher of the silent snow." The crowd applauded louder now. Someone cheered, "Good boy!" and laughter rippled through the square. Rex lifted his head high, ears alert, almost regal. Elias felt something swell inside him, pride he hadn't permitted himself in years. When the ceremony ended, people mingled, shaking hands, hugging, sharing stories. Children approached Rex shyly. He stood still while they petted him, tongue out, tail wagging slightly. Amber drifted through the crowd until she reached Elias. Her expression was soft. "Everything changed because of you," she said. He shook his head. "Because of Rex." She countered gently, "Because you listened to him." They stood in that silence, a silence that no longer weighed but warmed. After a moment, Amber spoke softly. "When I was on that ice, I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. And now, I never will be again." She looked around the square, the community, the town, laughter and relief floating like confetti in the air. "You helped give all of this back." Elias absorbed the moment, then said something he had not said to anyone in half a decade. "I'm staying." Amber blinked. "You are?" He nodded. "Snowbridge, I'll stay." Then he looked at Rex. "We'll stay." Rex exhaled approvingly. Amber smiled, broad and genuine. And in that closing moment, sunlight finally returned, strong enough to cast crisp shadows. The thaw had come, not only for the river, but for Elias Grant, for Amber Wyatt, and for a German shepherd whose quiet vigilance saved a life, a town, and a broken man's soul. In the quiet ending of this journey, we are reminded that the miracles of God do not always arrive in thunder or bright signs. Sometimes they appear through the loyalty of a dog who simply refuses to let someone die alone, through the courage of a man who steps out of silence to help a stranger, and through the quiet grace that God places inside ordinary hearts. In our everyday lives, we each face our own winter's moments of worry, loneliness, or fear. But God walks beside us even then, guiding our steps and sending comfort in unexpected forms and reminding us that we are never alone. If this story touched your spirit, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment to tell us your thoughts and type "Amen" if you believe in the gentle miracles God sends. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, protection, and strength. And please remember to support the channel by pressing subscribe so we can continue bringing stories of faith, compassion, and quiet redemption.